Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the San Diego Remake Learning Back to School Kickoff event, brought to you by the University of San Diego's Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education, and also the San Diego County Office of Education. We are so excited and happy that you could join us today. Take a moment and tell us hi in the chat. Let us know who you are and where you're coming from. This could also help us with attendance for those gift cards later on. But we are super excited to have with us Professor and author Rick Miller, who will be speaking on the topic, creating and activating hope. And I don't know about all of you, but I believe that we could all use a little extra hope right now. Some encouragement for this year, especially you teachers who are encountering another school year. This is a very timely topic. Now, we are looking forward to Rick's presentation, but before we begin, I want to take a moment to share with you a little bit about the Remake Learning Initiative. As you can see here, Remake Learning Days is an exciting national festival that spreads across 17 cities. It started in Pittsburgh in 2016 and has expanded to cities across America. This celebration highlights innovative learning experiences and opportunities for youth and their families, and also educators as well. But it helps you with this festival. Our intent is for you to develop your sense of creativity, perseverance, and creativity. And if you look to the left of the screen, you can see these are the dates, April 22nd through May 23rd. These are the dates for our next year's festival. And Aaron, as I go through this spiel afterwards, if there's anything that you want to add, please do. Aaron English is our co-host for this event, as like I stated that earlier, but she can feel free to chime in at any time. Remake Learning, the Remake Learning Network, ignites best practices for youth engaging in relevant and equitable ways. A lot of the events that we offer are minimal to no cost, so cost is never a barrier, and it helps students to navigate through social and technological changes that are ever occurring. This festival encourages opportunities for parents and caregivers to experience learning with their children, which is super fun, and to connect with local organizations in the community, and also to help avoid summer learning loss. If you notice that the festival runs from April through May, which is right before summer, so it helps students to get some learning right before they enter the summer, and something that they can carry through with them until the next festival. So really excited about that. We have our, here on the screen, our co-producers for Remake Learning. As I stated, it started in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so we have Yuling Chang, Dory Taylor, and Tyler Samstag. And let me look real quick. Is Yuling or Dory here with us this evening?
I didn't see him on the list.
Okay, awesome. I wanted to make sure if they were here to give them an opportunity to just say a little something about it, since this is their initiative overall, but we are happy participants. Now, Remake Learning is bigger than just San Diego. It's a collective effort, and it would not be possible without our national sponsors featured here on the screen. And also, it would not be possible without these partners as well. Here on the screen, you see that this graphic here represents the entire community. Remake Learning is truly an opportunity for everyone to work together to help keep youth and their families engaged. And so this includes museums, centers of faith, parks, schools, and more. We even have micro awards available, $250 to $500 that's available to support events. And last the last cycle earlier this year, we had at least 13 or 14 local organizations who we were able to award micro awards to. So there's funding there to support you. So please take advantage of that. And your event could be any of these wonderful learning icons here. It could be art, maker, outdoor learning, science, technology, youth voice, and professional development. So the sky's the limit as to what you can do. I wanted to take a minute to introduce our dynamic local team here in San Diego, because our planning committee, without them, this would not be able to get done. We had 28 events last year, 28 events from over 22 organizations, and it was definitely thanks to a team effort here. And so our team helps us really to network, connect, plan, and just really contribute to this learning festival. If any of our team members are here and would like to say hello, please take just a few seconds to say hi and tell us your organization. I'll start with Erin.
I just don't want to jump ahead of anyone if anyone else is on. I'm Erin English. I'm the Executive Director of Innovation, and it's absolutely my pleasure to be here tonight. And I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Miller, and I'll wait for just a moment to do that. But in the meantime, thank you for having us and hosting us, Alina.
You're welcome. Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Duran, and I'm the program manager for the California Global Education Project. Our project does professional development for teachers, so we're one of the California subject matter projects. And welcome. I hope you enjoy today.
Wonderful. Josh.
Hi, my name is Josh Rayhout, and I'm a membership development specialist with Schools First Federal Credit Union. We are a not-for-profit credit union based here in California, and we are committed to serving education and all of excellence in education. I'm looking forward to a fantastic afternoon with all of you today.
Jennifer.
Yes, hi, I'm Jennifer Primesberger with Sanford College of Education, National University. I'm with the teacher education department and all in teacher preparation, and it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful. I don't see Eric has jumped on, but we have Eric Meyer, who is our San Diego STEM ecosystem leader, and also which is a part of the Fleet Science Center. And so he works with us faithfully. We have Dr. Lisa Dawley, who is the executive director of the Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education at the University of San Diego, and also Mary Meyer, who is our strong partner at Barnes and Noble. And so like I said, just a dynamic team, and looking to expand. So if you're interested, please directly reach out to us. We would love to have you. Everyone who's attending this webinar today will receive a follow-up email, and so just feel free to respond if you feel so moved to be a part of this committee. And then last but not least, before I turn it over to Erin, I would like to say on behalf of Remake Learning and our community partner, Barnes and Noble, we're excited to announce that we will be raffling off $25 e-gift cards to randomly selected educators who have registered and attended this event, and we have plenty to give. So I mean, looking now, we might have a gift for everyone who's attending right now, so that's exciting. But to all the winners, we will notify you via email that you won. And also, we are excited to share with you that everyone will receive a free digital educator resource toolkit from all of our local San Diego partner organizations. So everyone who just introduced themselves has something to share with you. And so again, we are excited, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And at this time, I will turn it over. Oh, you know what? I see Eric. Eric, do you want to say hi?
Howdy, sorry, my Zooming computer was slow in waking up.
No
I'm Eric Meyer. I'm the Assistant Director of Education at the Fleet Science Center and the project lead for the San Diego STEM ecosystem.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. Erin, I will turn it over to you to do the bio for Rick Miller.
Oh, well, thank you, Alina. And it's absolutely my pleasure to introduce Rick Miller. And about 3 years ago, we kind of figured out, I had the pleasure of going to one of his seminars. And, you know, I've been in education for about 30 years, and I have been to a lot of education seminars. Before I get to his bio, I'm going to give you a little background on how he moved me. It was a moving experience, and it was a very simple concept. But what he did is he put the research behind something that was so simple that it's something so easy to use and easy to do that anyone could be doing it to change lives. Is how we look at things differently. So I'm so grateful all of you are here. If while you're here, you want to tweet things out to get other people to join on, it's a message that everyone should hear in their career. And I wish I would have heard it 30 years ago. So I'm going to read his bio right now. And Rick Miller is the founder of Kids at Hope, an international child and youth development organization that studies family, school, and community cultures to understand better the dynamics of success and failure. He is also a professor of practice and clinical director at Arizona State University's Center for the Advanced Study and Practice of Hope. How cool is that? I'm seriously. Anyways, Rick has spent 51 years in the field of child and youth development as a practitioner, and he did start at 12. I think we figured out he started working at 12. Spent 51 years in the field of child and development and youth development as a practitioner, researcher, professor, public policy expert, and author. Rick's research is revolutionizing the understanding of child and youth development and culture. His work is modeled in 21 states and 4 countries and has been cited by the American Academy of Pediatrics and adopted by the Arizona Supreme Court to redefine the juvenile justice system from risk to hope. He is the author, that's so powerful. He is the author of 3 books and 2 comic books, including Youth Development from the Trenches and The Soul, Science, and Culture of Hope. He has received Arizona State University's Visionary Award, the City of Phoenix, Martin Luther King Jr. Living the Dream Award, and the Freedom Foundation at Valley Forge George Washington Medal. Among his many keynotes, workshops, seminars, and symposium, Rick delivered a TED Talk in Washington, D.C. And Rick lives in Phoenix with his wife, Esther, and they have 2 children and 4 grandchildren. And it is absolutely my pleasure to welcome him virtually to Southern California, where we're hosting him today for Remake Learning. So Rick, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin. That was very kind and very thorough and very tiresome to think about those 52 years now of commitment to our young people across the country and now around the world. And we know we have lots to do with our young people. We know we're not where we should be with them. And I hope that this presentation allows us a further exploration and investigation, examination of what we could do better to help every child succeed without exception, which is kind of the curious thought behind this presentation, because I think by and large, conventional wisdom will tell us that some kids are capable of success, but we're not sure that all kids are capable of success. So we're not surprised when some kids fall through all the safety nets that we've tried to create them, because on the front end, we may not actually believe that they're going to succeed. And we've tested that concept across the country. We ask people, do you believe all kids are capable of success without exception? And we give them a Likert scale from 1 to 10, and a good number of them will circle 10. And then we ask them again whether they believe that kids who come from difficult circumstances, and I'll share that scale with you in a few moments, but kids who come from difficult circumstances, and we list out what those may be, do you believe those kids are capable of success? And all of a sudden, their strong belief that all kids can succeed has been tempered by these demographic issues, the trauma issues, the risk issues, and we fall back on a self-fulfilling prophecy that articulates too easily to us. Some kids are expected to do very well. Some kids are expected to struggle a little bit, but probably figure it out as they go through life. And then some kids may not make it at all. and therefore we're not surprised, because often we work towards those self-fulfilling prophecies and aren't surprised when they actually come true. What we did in our research back in 1993, we turned that up on its head. We made a hypothetical statement, which we tested, that all kids are capable of success without exception. And it's amazing the pushback we got on that. It was almost a crazy hypothesis because of the world we lived in. And yet we spent 7 years testing that hypothesis against the existing research from 7 different human services disciplines. And we discovered that that hypothesis can hold water, and that we have to make a unique commitment to the success of every child. And our work began to go in the direction that I'm going to share with you this afternoon and this evening, depending on where you are in different parts of the country participating. But I hope to create a body of knowledge and information and substance that will allow you to, at the end of the presentation, hold true to the belief that every kid can succeed, no exceptions, if we, the adults, and the cultures in which they grow in, do our job. And we will demonstrate to the rest of the world that something can happen quite transformationally in these kids' lives. The interesting intersection for us as we went forward with our work was the science of hope began to emerge in the 1990s. At the same time, we were testing this hypothesis that all kids are capable of success, no exceptions. This new field coming out of the field of positive psychology began to examine hope for the very first time. And yet it's curious to me, even now looking back, how long it took hope, the construct of hope, to get to the research table. We've been talking about hope from the beginning of humankind. It's been part of who we are as a species, and yet we never put it underneath a scientific microscope to understand its dynamics. We talked about it theologically, mythology speaks about it, philosophy speaks about it, everyday conversation speaks to it, but science didn't take hope as a serious discipline until the 1990s. And it was at that juncture that we intersected with that science. It breathed new life into our research project at Arizona State University. And this evening, I'm going to be sharing with you the findings from it and demonstrate to you how, in fact, we can succeed without exceptions. And part of that is ensuring that the adults who are participating in this regard believe that they're capable of success without exception. And we call our project Kids at Hope to distinguish it from Youth at Risk. Now, you all have remembered or participated in carrying forward that particular myth in life, that some kids were at risk. They were at risk because they came from maybe poverty, they came from families who were dysfunctional, they came from families who were poorly educated, highly mobile, overused and abused drugs, were somewhat abusive, experienced a disproportionate amount of trauma, and those kids automatically became labeled as at-risk kids. The at-risk column becoming the deficit column, the at-hope column becoming the asset column. And you know, on a financial statement, you try to get rid of your deficits and add to your assets. And yet we put these kids in a deficit column, and that became the labeling, became a stereotype, and became the way we treated them. And I'm often will cite a part of My Fair Lady, and those of you that are somewhat close to my age, within 20 or 30 years on either side of it, will remember this important segment of My Fair Lady when Eliza Doolittle says to Professor Higgins, if you want me to act like a flower girl from the docks, treat me like a flower girl from the docks. If you want me to act like a lady, treat me like a lady. Our point to that is, if you want me to act like a youth at risk, treat me like a youth at risk. And if you want me to act like a kid at hope, treat me like a kid at hope. And that takes me full circle back to the adults in the room. And the adults in the room, you cannot have a kid at Hope until you first have an adult at Hope. So part of this presentation will be testing your sense of hopefulness and whether hope is a general emotion that you experience sometimes, but not other times, or is hope a cognitive strategy that you use to navigate life? And that will be hopefully an interesting examination of your own relationship with hope, as well as my scientific explanation of what hope is, and then culminating with how do we create cultures of hope? How do we create places where everyone becomes hopeful? And what is the power of unleashing hope for all? Because I can tell you, scientifically speaking, that we don't have enough hope in our lives. And I can tell you, scientifically speaking, that hopeful people do better in life than people who don't have hope. And if in fact we know that, we know scientifically as a powerful fact that hopeful people do better than hopeless people, where are the people who are finding hope getting it from? And why can't the people who aren't finding hope, why they can't find it, and what, again, we can do about it. So I hope you see this as a very inspirational presentation. I hope you see it as a very empowering presentation. And as Aaron pointed out, I hope you see it as a very transformational presentation, that this isn't a one and done, that it was interesting information, but as soon as the presentation is over, it's back to business as usual. So we really want to encourage you to take these thoughts, concepts, strategies, and then see what you can do with it going forward. And we are available 24/7. Both the not-for-profit organization I founded to share this information around the world, but the center that we have at Arizona State University that continues to research in this work. So we stand ready to be supportive. With that as a general background, let me get into the formal part of my presentation and take you on a journey with me that I think you will find absolutely fascinating. So here's the part that I'm most fearful of, is sharing my screen and making sure that my PowerPoint pops up. So Alina, tell me if that's showing up.
Yes, it is.
And it's the full screen, right? It's yeah, not the notes or anything else that will confuse me and everybody else.
It looks great.
So thank you to the Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education. Thank you to Aaron English, the San Diego County Office of Education, for recognizing the importance of this work and your willingness to invest and share it with others. So I'm tickled to be part of this guest lecture series that you're sponsoring. The title of my presentation is Creating and Activating Hope. So I want to talk about how do you create hope, which I think is an interesting topic in its own right. And then how do you activate hope, which is putting it into action that helps us navigate our lives. So it becomes a very personal side of what we do each day with this construct, this dynamic, this energy force we call hope. And then how do we share it with others so we could create a culture of hope? So this is brought to you by both Kids at Hope, the not-for-profit organization that shares this information with youth serving groups across the country, schools, behavioral health agencies, child welfare agencies, juvenile justice systems, recreation programs, wherever kids are. This is part of that. It's not just for a group of kids. This is for all kids, and I think you'll see how that plays out beautifully. So Kids at Hope is the arms and legs, as I would describe it, to the Center for the Advanced Study and Practice of Hope. We're taking it outside of the university laboratory and actually seeding it in all the agencies and departments and organizations that serve our young people. So we have a quick poll, right, Alina? Do we have that ready to go?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so do I need to stop sharing for you to bring that poll up?
I should be able to launch it and yeah.
Okay, there we are. Yay. Okay, so far so good. So I want you to participate really on the front end, and I have a few questions that I'd like you to respond to. So I think there are about 4 questions. So don't forget to scroll down so you can see all 4 questions. And I'll give you a few moments to respond to them so we can kind of talk about them on the backside of this segment.
Alina, how do you respond to them? I see them here. Do we click on it?
Yes, you should be able to choose to select them. Erin, you're a co-host, so you may not be able to.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So usually by this time you start seeing people responding. So I'm wondering if there's something amiss.
It's working on my end, Rick. I can see.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Responses. Yeah.
Okay, so it's probably asking me to respond. That's why I'm not seeing it. So let me respond so I'm part of the participation here. Okay, now I see it.
Rick, let me know when you're ready to share the results.
Okay, usually a couple seconds more would be adequate. It's just a short series of questions, and I think we're ready to launch the results.
Okay.
Okay, so when we asked you the question, how hopeful do you feel today? About a third of you say you feel very hopeful. A little less than half feel somewhat hopeful. 19% are getting there. It's late in the afternoon or early in the evening in some cases, so you have just a few hours to do that. And again, about 6% said in a couple hours, and we're going to talk about why sometimes you feel more hopeful than other times and whether or not you actually have control over that. The second question we asked is, when people are around you, do they feel more hopeful? And 50% said that they do, that they're mongers of hope. 25% said no, they're not. They actually don't make people feel hopeful, and 25% aren't sure. And again, we can understand that. So we'll be talking about how you share hope with others. And then we asked the question, my school organization is a place of hope for adults and youth. I love to see this number, 75%, a large majority say yes, 13% aren't there yet, and 13% aren't sure. So that's 26%. That's a quarter. That represents a lot of kids. So we need to be a little bit more effective in that regard. And then the last question we ask is why you're awesome. And 6% said someone has to be, so you chose yourself. You are who you are. And most of us said we're all of the above. So congratulations on that. I hope to kind of return to some of those themes within the quick poll that we offered you. So I want to get right into the subject matter at hand here. And that is that how do you create this energy force we call hope? And then how do you activate it? Because we've treated hope like something that's squishy, right? It's not really concrete. We can't get our arms around it. We really have a hard time defining it. We know it when we feel it, and then we know we're missing it when we don't feel it. But how do you actually create it? And I think once we understand what's behind people who feel hopeful, boy, that should really change the trajectory of our lives and the people we love and care about, and in many cases serve. And then knowing how you create it, you have to activate it. It has to become part of your everyday strategies of navigating life. I love this particular slide because it shows lightning in the sky, and I have to believe the first people beyond Benjamin Franklin that imagined how do you harness the power that we see in nature? How do you harness that to benefit humankind? And I think we should see hope the same way, as an energy force that exists out there in nature, and we're trying to harness it for ourselves. So I love that particular slide. I have to compliment each and every one of you that are participating today. And that is because we have been through the last 19 months together, where hope was challenged in our own lives. In many cases, many lives lost because things just didn't play out the way they should have. We weren't ready for some of the challenges that this COVID virus placed upon us. And many of us wondered whether we would be able to rebound in one shape, form, or another, emotionally, physically, intellectually, in terms of the setback we understood to be COVID, and we're still struggling our way through it. But we're here today, and I think that's a testament to the human spirit, the testament to being able to see a world that doesn't exist, that's a little bit better than the world we're existing in today, or the world that we saw yesterday. And hope gives us that perspective. And you need to understand that we're the only species on the face of the earth that was given the gift of hope. And so if it's a gift that's given to us, it's in our responsibility to use it for ourselves and use it for the people we love, care about, and serve. Again, you are representative of the power of hope, and I'll be talking about resiliency as well, because often we confuse hope with resiliency. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back after a stressor or a trauma or a huge setback of whatever nature it comes to us in, emotionally, intellectually, physically, spiritually, right? So these stressors happen to us in all facets of our life, and people sometimes think of resiliency as one size fits all, when I really look at resiliency from 5 different perspectives. How are you physically resilient, emotionally or socially resilient to setbacks or stressors or trauma? How are you intellectually resilient? I had dinner with a lifelong friend of mine from elementary school through high school, and we've stayed in touch with each other all these many decades since. And in our reminiscing, she shared with me a teacher that we had in middle school that she said, "Do you remember Mr. So-and-so?" And I said, "I do." And she said, "You know, I once asked him a question in class, and he said to me, overheard by the entire class, that was the stupidest question he had ever heard." And today, when she tells that story, her eyes still tear up. So that was a traumatic moment. That was testing her intellectual resiliency, and it was a huge setback for her. Economic resiliency, we understand, is living within your means, setting aside some money for a rainy day, investing wisely, buying low, selling high. You know, how do you prepare for economic setbacks? And then spiritual setbacks, watching that disaster in Florida where the high-rise collapsed, and listening to a reporter interview a rabbi, and the reporter asked the rabbi, "How can you believe in a benevolent God when something like this occurs on earth?" And it was testing the rabbi's spiritual resiliency, and all of us have that experience in one shape or another during life, and we have to make decisions. So the question is, how do we bounce back from setbacks? And the way we do that is a sense of normalcy, again, a unique gift given to humankind. And that is this idea of homeostasis. And most of you remember that from your high school biology class, the ability for the body to find that sense of normalcy, that homeostatic position. So if you get a cut on your hand, you clean it, you disinfect it, you bandage it, and then you allow the body to do what the body does best. It heals itself, right? And then you look after a week or two at that cut on your hand, and there's new skin cells, and you can't even identify where the cut was. That happens to us constantly, and it happens to us psychologically as well. Something that was devastating at one point, all of a sudden we work our way through and we find that normalcy that we're always looking for. Again, that is part of the makeup of the human species, to be able to take those body punches and get back up from them. But part of the secret of that is that we have to participate. That my wound on my hand would not have healed as well as it did, to the point that I can't even find where the cut existed, because I participated in that. The same thing in terms of psychological stressors or trauma or setback. You have to be able to participate, and the body will become a partner, and the mind will become a partner in that. It's just something we need to concentrate and understand. We have much more power over mind and spirit and body than sometimes we think we do, and we need to take advantage of it. That's what resiliency does. Resiliency is the ability to bounce back from a psychological setback, an economic setback, spiritual setback, emotional setback, intellectual setback. But that's not hope, because hope is the ability to go forward after that setback, be able to thrive, not just survive. So as a species, as all living species share, as a species, we share the requirement that we're supposed to survive. Once we come into this world, our number one responsibility before anything else is we're supposed to survive. And that's true for every other living species on the face of the earth, the millions of them. We share that. The second thing we share with all living species is we're supposed to reproduce. And knowing that all of you are out there today, I want to congratulate your family. You did pretty good on that front as well. And you're probably perpetuating your species. So you're carrying forward what living organisms are supposed to do. But that's where we divide ourselves from the rest of living organisms. That our third responsibility beyond surviving and reproducing is we're supposed to thrive. As human beings, we're expected to thrive. Now, if you're born a chimpanzee, congratulations, highly functioning primate, only second to the human primate, highly functioning primate sharing 98 to 99% of human DNA. But in 50 years from now, you will still be a chimpanzee. If you're born a human being, if you decide tomorrow to become a chef, you can become a chef. A sculptor, a sculptor. If you want to learn to become a mountain climber, a mountain climber. If you want to write a novel, you can write a novel. If you want to be a poet, you can become a poet. If you want to become an exercise guru, you learn to be an exercise. In other words, we can recreate ourselves into so many other aspirations we have for ourselves by just committing. Only species that can do that, to be able to recreate itself. And we do that through a concept called hope. Because hope gives us the ability to thrive. It allows us to see a future that doesn't exist, come up with pathways to pursue that future, and then allows us to put gas in our gas tank to get us from where we are to where we would like to be. And when you understand those three elements to this construct called hope, then you, in fact, are empowering yourself. So hope is a very active process that takes us forward. Homeostasis gets us back to a sense of normalcy, but it's not about thriving. And of course, just surviving isn't about hope either. I want to take that understanding a little bit further. And I want to talk about other constructs that so often become confused with hope. Optimism is not hope. Optimism is helpful. If you have a choice between being a pessimist and an optimist, let me suggest it's healthier for the brain to be an optimist. And what's healthy for the brain is often healthy for the body. So that symbiotic relationship holds true in so much of what we do. But optimism is a passive way of thinking things will get better, even without my action in support of that expectation. Self-esteem is important. Self-esteem is a healthy way of seeing yourself, but self-esteem isn't hope. And it could be also very passive. Grit, there's been a lot of studies on grit, defined as perseverance, but not discriminatory. People who just kind of stay with something, whether it's the right thing to stay with or the wrong thing to stay with, they just kind of stick with it. An important element to achieving things that are positive, but sometimes getting you off track on some negative where you waste a lot of time and energy. But grit is not hope. Self-efficacy, knowing you have the skill sets and the knowledge to accomplish something. Great studies in the field of self-efficacy versus hope. People who have self-efficacy but low hope achieve less in life than people who have high hope and low self-efficacy. Hope seems to be that independent variable that makes things happen, not just knowledge, not just skills, but the action associated with it. And of course, wishful thinking is not hope. And often hope is used as a synonym for wishful thinking. I hope this happens. I hope that happens. I hope the third thing happens. That's wishful thinking. That's waiting for someone else to grant that which you want to occur. Hope requires you to grant your own wishes, right? To come up with a plan to get to those wishes and know the amount of gas or energy that you have to expend to achieve it. So keep in mind, we often confuse hope, but science, putting hope underneath a microscope, science wants to be able to define it, and equally science wants a way to measure it. And if it's measurable, then science is excited about it, and we have ways of measuring hope now. We have entered a field for a good number of years, beginning in the 1960s when I began to look at this seriously. And you remember the 60s was the era that we started talking about prevention. Remember that punishment wasn't working well, rehabilitation wasn't working well, interventions weren't working well. They had some value, but what we needed to do is we needed to stop it before it happened. Prevention seemed to be the strategy of the last 50 years of the last century. And if you think about prevention, prevention means stop something from happening. I don't think that should be a goal. I think that's a short-sighted goal. I think prevention should be a byproduct of making good things happen in our lives, particularly the young people we serve. Prevention should be the byproduct of teaching kids how to be successful, not just stopping them from doing making bad choices, but actually getting them to understand what success is. The byproduct of successful people is that they don't have to drop out of school. They don't have to turn to drugs. They don't have to turn to alcohol. They don't have to make poor choices in terms of criminal activity to get whatever it is that they want to receive. So we have to think, not stop thinking about prevention. We have to move on from prevention to promotion. We have to think of ourselves as doing something proactive on behalf of the kids and think of prevention as a byproduct. Part of this is the way we see the world. We see the world back to the early characteristics of what we share with the all living organisms, and that is we have to survive, right? The first thing we have to survive. The way we survive is we look at risk and trauma as threats to our life. If you're constantly filled over with great risk in your life, or you've experienced a great deal of trauma, it holds you back from being successful because you're in a survival mode. It's almost paralyzing. So we've been studying risk and trauma for a long time. We understand risk, we understand trauma, we understand trauma-informed care, we understand adverse childhood experiences. We are experts in risk and trauma. But we are not yet experts in hope. We are not yet experts in hope. So that's why we have trauma-informed care, but we don't have hope-informed care. And it's two sides of the same coin. So all we've been doing is looking at one side of the coin. Is it an important side to look at? Absolutely, you want to look at that side, but you want to take time and turn the coin over to see what else exists in our universe that can be helpful to kids. I see this as being bridged by this concept called resiliency. How do you move from risk to trauma over to the other side of the coin? And I believe that bridge is being resilient. I think we take advantage of that built-in homeostatic characteristic that each of us were born with to try to find that sense of normalcy, going from risk and trauma, using resiliency to be able to bounce back, and then using hope to thrive. And when you can see that, then you have a framework in which to go forward in life. I think we're stuck on one side of the coin. Maybe we're on the ridge of the coin, but we certainly haven't fully explored like we should the other side of the coin. And I hope that today's presentation helps us do that. The other thing I want to say in terms of activating and creating hope is recognizing that hope is a choice, that we can choose to be hopeful. That is again, the gift of being a human being. We get to make choices every single day. And I just want to offer this as a simple, straightforward thought that has a deeper examination that would be required to fully understand it. But the simplest way to be a hopeful person is to hang out with hopeful people. The simplest way to be a helpless and hopeless person is hang out with helpless, hopeless people. Because we're a social species. We tend to mimic the people we're around. We tend to talk like them. We tend to act like them. We tend to have accents like them. We tend to take on their characteristics because of our need as a social species to belong. So if we're hanging out with hopeless people, we'll begin to talk like them, mimic them, come up with stories similar to theirs, so that we feel that we're part of that because of the need to belong to a social group. So if you look at this particular slide that I have up here, you see one side of the crowd representing happiness, love, resiliency, optimism, contentment, and hope, and the other side, pessimism, frustration, anxiety, anger, and depression. Depending on what side of the group you hang out with, you will begin to represent those, and the geography and the architecture of your brain will change by the people you hang out with, by the behavior that you adopt and adapt from those people that you're part of. So a simple way of becoming hopeful is hang out with hopeful people. I also think this is an important segue to talking about how we actually get to choose our personality. And we too often choose the personality unconsciously. And by choosing it unconsciously and not being aware of it, it also, again, changes the architecture and structure of our brain. So let's stop for a moment, be very aware, conscious of these choices we make. And by doing so, we're changing the networks and the synapses and the wiring and the firing of the 82, 85 billion neurons that come into play within our brains. But let's define what a pessimist is. A pessimist takes everything personally. It's the woe is me person. They see everything as pervasive. This happens, negative things happen to me in all parts of my life, from being in the wrong line to forgetting to take an umbrella out, whatever it is, it's pervasive in all parts of life and it's permanent. It doesn't change. If you hear that voice in your head, or you hear other people talking, using examples of taking bad things as personal, pervasive, or permanent, either you or they are a pessimist, right? You're articulating the way your brain is firing for you. So it's the conscious expression of how your thinking is coming out in your words and your stories. The optimist, on the flip side of that, takes things impersonal. Boy, I had a bad day yesterday. Boy, I'm having a great day today. I had a bad situation there, but a great situation over here. And this too shall pass. If you hear that coming out of your voice, or you hear that coming from other people, you or they are optimists, and they are optimists. Very healthy way of creating a healthy brain is to think in those terms and to allow your brain to create that sense of optimism. But we want to go forward beyond optimism. We want to go to hopeful people, because again, optimism isn't being hopeful. Hopeful requires action. So what's the distinction between a pessimist, an optimist, and a hopeful person? A hopeful person will see as very mindful. They are aware of what they're doing and how they're doing it. They're paying attention. They're in the present moment. And you know you're in the present moment when three things are in your favor. Number one, you're in the present moment when you're not shackled to the past, worried about sadness or regret. You're not lost in the future, being anxious about things that haven't even happened yet and you're worried about it. You're not lost in your frustration where you're angry with people or things, or even angry with yourself. You're in the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, you can't be other places. You can't be angry. You can't, because you're focused on other people and things. You can't be sad because you're lost in the future. And you can't be anxious because you're worried about the past, and you're worried about the future. Mindful people know that they're in the present moment. They know that they're in control. They're the most creative, they're the wisest, and they're the most intuitive when they don't get lost in other dimensions in their life, allowing their brain to wander into areas that aren't healthy for them. So mindful people are hopeful people. People that know they can manage their lives, take control of their lives, are hopeful people. And hopeful people always have goals. Always have goals. Not true for pessimists, not true for optimists, but absolutely true for hopeful people. So you can, again, look at this criteria and help define yourself and get to where you would like to be on the hope scale. We know this, the old proverb of seeing the glass half full or half empty. We know it, as well as we know 2 + 2 is 4. So we know that the glass half empty is a pessimist. The glass half full is an optimist, the same glass. But here's the distinction between a hopeful person. A hopeful person knows they can fill the glass. That's being mindful that you know you can fill the glass, having a goal to fill the glass, and taking the action to actually do it. So again, a very clear distinction, being able to give you a choice of who you want to be and how you want to act in accordance with that, to understand the healthy brain creates a healthy body. So that takes me into talking about the brain. And if I would ask each of you to draw the brain, if I ask each of you to draw a brain, you would come up with something that you see on your screen, right? You kind of know where it fits in the body, basically its shape, and you understand its lobes and its different systems, right? You have a pretty good understanding because we've seen enough graphics of the brain. We've actually seen live brains through autopsies or what have you. But I have a different viewpoint of what I think the brain looks like. This is what I think the brain looks like. I think if we had a powerful enough microscope, this is what the brain would look like to us. I think it looks like Parliament. It looks like two forces on either side of an issue with a different mindset, debating whatever the issue is of the day. And they debate and then they take a vote. And once the vote is taken, it translates into action. In our case, it translates into behavior. So let me give you a clear-cut example. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, you're up, all of a sudden you said, maybe a little nosh would be good for me. You walk over to the refrigerator in complete darkness. If you don't know where anything else is in the house, you know where the refrigerator is. So you can find the refrigerator in complete darkness. You open the refrigerator, a wonderful light comes on, and it illuminates what's inside this appliance. And there before your very eyes is a slice of cheesecake or an apple. Once you see the cheesecake and the apple in the refrigerator at 2 o'clock in the morning, Parliament's now in session. And the debate begins in your head. Boy, that cheesecake looks awfully good. Boy, I've been pretty good for a couple of weeks. I think I deserve a reward. The other side arguing, but the apple is so much better for you. You'll feel a lot better about yourself afterwards. And now the debate begins and there's a vote taken, and based on the count of the votes cast, either you will grab for the cheesecake or you'll grab for the apple. So that's how I perceive, again, grabbing for a sense of hopelessness or grabbing for a sense of hopefulness that you get to make those choices, understanding that the brain is giving you the choices and debating the pros and the cons for whatever action you're going to take. So that's one of my perspectives on the way the brain looks. And this is my other perspective of the brain looks. This is you getting up in the morning, your brain is activated, you're going from a kind of an unconscious sleep to being awoken, and now you begin to make a series of decisions. And I believe those series of decisions of you get to go to various voting booths, and you can vote at this point in time, that mindful person knowing where they are in space and time. You can vote to be hopeful, you can vote to be hopeless, you can vote to be optimistic, you can vote to be pessimistic. Knowing that choice has to be a wonderful sense of empowerment, not just living by the forces that overwhelm you at any given time, but knowing that you get to make those choices each and every day. So let's put you to work for a second, right? I've been doing a lot of work here and you've been kind of just participating in it, but now for me to activate you. I have a little quiz on your screen. You can just take a slip of paper, you can keep it in your mind's eye, however you want to do it. But I want you to answer each of those questions by rating them, ranking them based on the legend I offer you on the front side of that. If the statement that you read is definitely false as it represents you, you would choose a number 1 and add a number 1 in that space. If the statement you're reading is definitely true, you would put a number 8 in that space. And accordingly, if it's somewhere between 1 and 8, you would put the corresponding number to represent what you believe that reality is. So take a moment, put the corresponding number in each of those slots, and then then I want you to add them up, and then I want to talk about what those scores represent. Okay, you should have a grand total. So let's see what those scores represent. So here's my hope scale. That the little test you took is a highly reliable, highly validated test. It's been in existence for, I think, close to 30 years. It's weathered the test of time, and it offers some interesting insights. And this is what we learned about high hope and low hope and mean hope people. If you range, your total score is 6 to 29, because you can't get a score lower than 6, and you can't get a score higher than 48. If you did your math correctly or followed my instructions correctly, you shouldn't be able to get a score lower than 6 or a score higher than 48. So when you added all these 6 numbers, you should have, again, that range. If you range between 6 and 29, that's low hope. That means you're struggling in your life with your goals, your pathways to achieve those goals, or the energy that you're able to commit to achieve it. You're what we would call low hope, and we have correlations in life of what low hope means. If you're ranging between 30 and 40, that's what we're finding out to be our mean range. That means you're kind of in a balance where some of the goals are going well and other goals are struggling, but that's what most of us experience each and every day in our life. And so that it's part of the human experience, right? Some days better than other days. But if you score between 41 and 48, you're a high hope person, highly correlated with being happier, better relationships, achieving more goals, healthier, and living longer. Those are all associated with high hope folks. So, and high hope folks seem to have their goals well in place. They seem to have pathways to those goals, the strategies, the routes, the roadways to get from point A to point B. And they seem to understand that each goal has a different level of commitment associated with it. So if you're traveling from San Diego to Los Angeles, you know what the route, basic route you're going to take. You know what happens if one of those routes are shut down. You know you have options. You just don't return back to square one. And you know how much gas it takes to go from San Diego to Los Angeles. But if you choose to go to San Francisco, there's going to be other routes, and you're going to need more gas, and you're going to need more time to get from point A to point B. Hopeful people, high hope people seem to understand that, and that's part of that sense of mindfulness. I also want to caution you in terms of what these hopes scale reveals. And that is like getting your blood pressure taken at the doctor. The blood pressure, when you get taken at the doctor or your health provider, only gives you the reading at the moment they're taking the blood pressure. It doesn't tell you what your blood pressure was yesterday. It doesn't tell you what your blood pressure is going to be tomorrow. It only tells you what your blood pressure is at the moment that blood pressure reading is taken. This is true with this hope scale. All we can do is measure where you are today in your mind's eye. It doesn't tell us where you would have been yesterday. It doesn't tell you where you'll be tomorrow. But over time, if we administer this over a period of time, like your blood pressure, we can know whether it's the normal range, the high range, or the low range, and do something accordingly with it. So this is a pretty good scale. We have a similar scale for young people as young as 8. So we can measure their sense of hopefulness and understand the higher the hope, the greater correlations to positive things in their lives. So let's start digging a little bit deeper into this construct called hope. Let's put it underneath the microscope like we began to do actually in the early 1990s. I'll show you a quick video at the end of my presentation of kind of the history of hope, a very quick video. But here we're dialing this microscope down, this metaphoric microscope, to see what hope consists of. This became our definition, our working definition as part of our research project in defining hope. Hope was the ability to visit your future. We had to spend a few years defining what future was because no one had ever defined future. We had limited to what do you want to be when you grow up? That seems to be very limiting. When you talk to a kid about their future, what do they want to be? We should be talking about how they want to contribute to the future. And we should be using some directional elements to give them a way to focus future from abstract to concrete. So we included home and family, education and career, community and service, hobbies and recreation. We want a future to be much more multidimensional. And then here's the part that I think we need to understand about hope. Return to the present and then prepare yourself for the journey. Hope is that ability to see something that doesn't exist, see it within each of these 4 destinations, categories, domains, come back to the present moment now that you visualize your future and say, how do I get there? How do I achieve it? And that's the part of activating hope. So let's continue this journey and see how we can kind of get from point A to point B. Part of that is understanding the DNA of hope. So if I dial my metaphoric microscope down a little bit more powerfully, highly electromagnetic microscope, and now I begin to see DNA being revealed in my microscope. We know around 1952, we understood how the DNA molecule discovered by Thomas Watson and Francis Crick created our understanding of DNA and the sequences associated with the double helix that we're very aware of today. We believe if our microscope was powerful enough, we would actually see a triple helix. We would see 3 interwoven bands. On one of those bands, we would see the word goals, that hope has goals. It would be prominent in the hope DNA. We'd see a different strand that would say pathways. And a third one that would say agency, that's commitment, that's energy, would become the agent of our own lives. If you're missing any of those strands, you are not a hopeful person. If you may be an optimistic person, you may have high self-efficacy, you may have high self-esteem, you may have high grit. What you're missing is hopefulness, the power of being a hopeful person, because a hopeful person always has these three strands. That is the DNA of hope. It doesn't change. It has goals, it has pathways to those goals, and it has the energy, the commitment, the gas in the gas tank to get from point A to point B. Keep that in mind, because it's a healthy, powerful way of examining your own life and helping kids examine their life. We know for a fact that a lot of young people from truly disadvantaged situations have high aspirations, but very low expectations. They want to do well in life, but they don't believe that's going to happen for them. And if you look at the gap between having high expectations of what you see you would like to achieve in life, a good education, a good professional job, living in a safe neighborhood, having a happy family, having good health care, all those things, and then being faced with the reality, what part of that do you think you're going to get? And that is not consistent with the high aspirations. What's missing? And what's missing is that bridge. And that bridge is called hope, because that creates the goals, the pathways, and tells you how to what commitment you have to make to get there. And that's the difference from people coming from very difficult circumstances, overcoming those things that we would think would be setbacks or risks or trauma in life, and still achieving because they fill that gap with this construct called hope. So creating hope. We began to understand in the 90s into the 21st century what hope was, but how do you create it? It's something to understand it, but how do you create it? And it was as simple as believing, connecting, and time traveling. What do we mean by that? We discovered that kids who are believed in become much more hopeful than kids who aren't believed in. Do you believe all kids are capable of success, no acceptance? I believe some kids are capable of success, but I'm not sure other kids are capable of success. The ones that you believe are capable of success have a higher chance of becoming hopeful than the ones that you question whether they become successful, because the genuineness and authenticity of your belief systems in the kids at Hope is then expressed in terms of their sense of hopefulness. So the number one thing, if you believe in kids with strong beliefs, expectations for their success, they seem to be much more hopeful than if you don't. You now have a binary choice. If I believe in them, I increase the chances of them becoming hopeful. We know how important that correlation with everything else in life is. If I don't believe in them, if I express some question about them, then I limit their chances of becoming hopeful. So I get to make a choice. Either I believe or don't believe, and there's consequences, positive and negative with the choice. Second one, kids are much more hopeful when you connect with them, have a meaningful, sustainable relationship. Doesn't say you're an effective math teacher, you're an effective English teacher. What it does say is that these kids know you have their back. You're emotionally as well as academically or socially invested in them. You're emotionally invested in them. And that becomes important for them to know, because that's part of our sense of survival anyway. So the connection becomes important. And the third element that leads to activating hope is time traveling. Kids who can envision their future do better in life than kids who can't. And we'll talk about that. So how do I create hope? I believe in kids, I connect with kids, and I time travel. That is the intentionality of a cultural strategy that uses those three tenets to create a cultural framework that ensures that no kid exists in our agencies, our organizations, our systems, our communities without adults believing, connecting, and time traveling with them. Because those are the kids that will grow up hopeful. We know those correlations. If in fact we have the systems in place, the services in place, the bureaucracy in place, but these kids leave not feeling believed in, connected to, or time traveling, everything has fallen off the ledge, and these kids can't be successful. We have not stacked the deck in their favor. We know now how to stack the deck in their favor. So mental time travel is the way we activate hope, this concept of allowing the brain to do something it is remarkable in its ability to do, and that is to be able to see a future that doesn't exist. And that future, we use those 4 destinations: home and family, education and career, community and service, hobbies and recreation, to establish goals, pathways, and agency in each of those. We're activating hope. The first part of that is the cork in the bottle. How do you get the cork out of the bottle? And the way you get the cork out of the bottle to release this concept called hope is you believe in kids, you connect with kids, you time travel with kids. What can be simpler than that? And yet it's the piece of the pie that we've been missing for centuries, if not the entire existence of humankind. And now we have a pretty good grasp on the answer. So we take the cork out and you can see hope beginning to be activated, but it's activated not just in release of energy, but it has a strategy and a sequence behind it that allows us to create these goals, pathways, and agency within these 4 destinations. Now, to do all that, to get all that, we have to change our mindsets, because as adults, we're too often proud of ourselves as becoming realists. And what is a realist? A realist is someone who can predict the future based on the past. I think that's a dangerous way of predicting the future, not completely, but kind of hear me out for a few more moments. A realist is someone who can predict the future based on the past. If it hasn't happened in the past, the chances of it happening in the future has been remarkably diminished. But, and here's my graphic of a realist, you know, the slings and arrows of life, the scars, bruises are still apparent, but that's my definition of a realist. This is where the mindset has to change. You have to see yourself as a genius. A genius is someone who can see a future that doesn't exist and doesn't give up until they achieve it. A realist is someone who sees some kids will do well, some kids will struggle, and some kids will fall through the cracks. And a realist believes all kids can succeed, no exceptions. Now, the reason I use that, because I think it's a very clear distinction between a realist who may not accept the fact that all kids can succeed because he hasn't seen it. And we begin to understand the distinction. A realist will say, I won't believe it until I see it. And a genius will say, I have to believe it before I see it, because if you believe it before you see it, then you're working towards the creation of the reality that you're trying to create for yourself. So here are my 2 examples of it. And I have a personal experience with geniuses and realists, because I discovered 52. I have to tell you, I've been married to this woman. Here's my wife. This is my wife, Esther Sita. Her nickname is Butchie. So if you ever meet her, call her Butchie. She may not answer to Esther or Esther Sita, but she will answer to Butchie. I discovered about 15 years ago that I was married, after 52 years, but only 15 years ago, that I was married to a realist. And how did I discover I was married to a realist? She was watching our then 4-year-old grandson, Jacob Emilio, who was over our house while we were babysitting him. And Jacob Emilio was watching the video Peter Pan. After watching the video Peter Pan, who do you think Jacob Emilio thought he was? Yep, he thought he was Peter Pan. So Jacob Emilio gets on top of the couch. He yells over to Grandma Butchie, Grandma Butchie, watch me fly. Grandma Butchie is a realist, I discovered at that moment in time, because she goes back to Jacob Emilio, don't jump off the couch, you'll fall down and break your leg, break your arm, break your neck, undeviate your deviated septum. Something terrible is going to happen to Jacob Emilio. But does Jacob Emilio at 4 years of age believe himself a genius or a realist? Because I've never heard a young person define themselves as a realist. That is an adult onset disease. So Jacob Emilio believes he can fly. So what does he do? He doesn't jump off the couch. He flies off the couch. He lands safely on the floor. He spreads out his arms. He looks up at Grandma Butchie and says, but Grandma Butchie, it feels so good to fly. See, I'm planning to take Jacob Emilio to the Grand Canyon in the not too distant future here in Arizona where I live. I hope he doesn't say to me, Papa, watch me But like the Wright brothers, he discovers he can't personally fly. But like the Wright brothers, he finds a way to fly. And that's what geniuses seem to do that realists give up on. They don't give up until they find a way to fly. They don't give up until they find a way to find a cure for or vaccine for polio or smallpox that killed 500 million people during its scourge on the earth. They don't give up until they find a way to cure cancer, because you don't want anyone in cancer research not believing they could find a cure for cancer, and you don't want anyone working with kids who don't believe they can find the cure to hopelessness. It's the cancer that our kids are affected with, and it takes as many lives as this cancer. Because we learned from Jacob Emilio and we learned from Peter Pan this important statement, that the moment you doubt whether you can fly, you cease forever to be able to do it. The moment you doubt whether you can help every child succeed, no exceptions, you cease forever to try to help every child succeed, no exception. The moment you decide you can't believe in all kids, you cease forever to believe you can believe in all kids, connect with all kids, and time travel with all kids. So here are our 4 major conclusions. I'm going to wrap this up in about 2 or 3 minutes. I want some time for Q&A, but I want you to understand what conclusions we came to after looking at this research for a good number of years and how we're advancing it. And the first one, I'm going to go back so we can kind of just focus on one at a time. Oops, here we go. It's not risk or trauma that prevents the kids from succeeding. Do they have an effect on kids? Yes, but it's not the reason they don't succeed. It's when they don't find hope. It's the absence of hope that becomes the independent variable, not the onslaught of risk and trauma. Is it impactful? Should we do something about it? Should we ignore it? Absolutely not. But turn the coin over. Find the answer to the vaccine, the antidote to risk and trauma, and it is hope. Those of us that work with other people's children, we don't control the risk that children experience, but we do control the hope that we give them. We're in control of hope, believing, connecting, time traveling. Third one, hope is taught, learned, but you can't teach that which you don't know. So if you don't know what shoe goes on the right foot, you can't teach a child what shoe goes on the right foot or left foot. If you yourself don't see yourself as a hopeful person, aren't in the mean range or the high range, it's going to be difficult for you to demonstrate to kids how hope can be a navigational tool for their lives to help them get from point A to point B. And the last one we discovered, and I think most people would agree to this, but they often don't say it, it's not programs and curriculum that makes the greatest difference, it's adult relationships. Instead of always looking for the right program or curriculum, we should be equally looking for the right relationships. And those 3 out of 4 research conclusions establish the framework that creates believing, connecting, and time traveling with kids. Focused on those 4 destinations, recognizing that kids who can't time travel, who are stuck with their regrets and frustrations of the past, poor choice of the past, we define them as suffering from terminal thinking. Terminal thinking leads to hopelessness, leads to bad choices, and prevents them from fulfilling their potential. So that's the cancer that we're fighting. We can change that. We know how to change it. We have the research behind it. We have the framework behind it. We have the practices behind it. We just have to use it. Our brains are time traveling brains. We activated by goals, pathways, and agency, and we get to those 4 destinations in life. And I think I'm going to leave it there and kind of just go to questions and answers, because I can see ourselves running out of time. So I'm going to shut down my shared screen and see if there's any chats that I can answer, or Alina, if you want to moderate that, that's fine as well.
Sure. If anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to put in the chat and I'll share them with Rick Miller. Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. So many wonderful nuggets that we can take with us on hope. I know personally, I always used optimism. I use the term to be synonymous with hope, but I see that hope is like taking it a step further, adding that action in there. So I love that.
You are now the valedictorian of this class.
Yay. Let's see.
Thoughts, questions, comments?
Yeah, there are a lot of positive comments in here that came throughout, but I'll make sure I share them with you as well. But someone recently said, Kelly, thank you for reminding me why I entered education in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kelly, I just want to comment to Kelly, and that reminder is important. I think the two greatest moments in a person's life, all of us included, I think the two greatest moments is the moment we are born. We didn't have a lot to do with it, but the universe did. The staggering elements that have to be in place over human existence for us to show up when we did, and whatever day of a year that we did. There had to be some reason behind that, and I think that has to be celebrated, one of the greatest moments in our life. And then the second greatest moment, I think that Kelly is referring to, is the moment we understand why we were born. And that's what gives us passion and purpose in life. When you know that you were born was not by accident, and then discovering why you were born, I think has to be the two greatest moments in someone's life. So thank you, Kelly, for triggering that thought.
Aaron placed in the chat, we should have a class on hope for all educators. And Christina seconded that. She said yes.
So we've done a little bit of that at ASU. We've offered classes on hope. We're doing some interesting research in the field, as some other universities have joined in that effort. Hope actually original Hope Science came out of the University of Kansas with a gentleman named Rick Snyder, who was really the founder of this field of Hope Science. But we trace our roots back to 1959, when Carl Menninger at the National Convention of Psychiatry said that hope is an understudied construct that's crucial to the human experience. So we got to pay attention to it. It just took us a while to pay attention to it, right? And then our good friend Sigmund Freud was completely wrong when he talked about hope. He said hope is not associated with reality, when in fact it is what creates our reality. So Freud in many cases was wrong, Menninger was right, and Snyder actually created the constructs.
Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but you published a book on this topic, right?
Yeah, well, I published a couple, 3. We try to do one that was similar to the 1 Minute Manager. We try to tell a story of how a school becomes a Kids at Hope school and a community becomes a Kids Hope community. How do we create a culture? And so that was an early effort to share our thoughts about it. Then I added a piece called Youth Development from the Trenches, which is where my background exists in the field of youth development. So I began to add the research piece to it. And then the most recent book a few years ago, I called The Soul, Science, and Culture of Hope, where, similar to today, I wanted to examine hope from 3 different lenses. The first was, what is our personal relationship with hope? What is science telling us about hope? And then the part I couldn't get into as deeply as I wanted to today was, how do we create a culture of hope? And although I didn't get into it, I just want to kind of leave you with the understanding is the culture is offered through this understanding that you believe, you connect, you time travel. If I wanted to create a culture of good public health, if that was my goal, I wanted people to practice good public health. One thing I would remind them of is washing their hands. So I'm sharing this all over. We know from COVID, but even before COVID, the importance of washing our hands. So you can't go in a public bathroom without seeing a sign to remind us to wash our hands. That prevents the spread of a biological disease. Let's take that same understanding and talk about how do you stop the spread of a psychological disease. And we begin to understand that hopelessness is a psychological disease that's passed on, right? So we have to be we have to have a public health approach to that. And so what does washing your hands look like when we're trying to prevent the spread of a psychological disease? And that's where we introduce publicly that together we believe we connect with time travel. That becomes our cultural framework. We can teach reading, writing, math, and science. We can talk about trauma-informed care. We can give people different ideas and thoughts in terms of strategies for themselves that we're raising kids, but we can't do that in the absence of first believing, connecting, and time traveling. We can't perform surgery until we wash our hands.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll be sure to share the links to your books as well in our follow-up. There's another question in here from Josh. What kind of body language is typically expressed by a hopeful person?
Oh, Josh, that may be another field of research, right? That may be, I don't, and I've always said to myself, I don't think there's a question I can't answer, but I never expected Josh to show up at one of my presentations and zing me with something like that. Josh, I'll be just candid with you. I don't know. That is important. I think there's an idea of, in terms of body language with active listening, right? I think we studied active listening as a way of engaging with people and connecting with people. So there may be a piece of that, but I don't think there's really some research that was done in measuring that. Tomorrow I'm speaking with one of the leading hope researchers from the University of Houston tomorrow for a chat. I may raise that question with him and see if I can stump him like Josh stumped me. Josh, you're not invited to any more of my presentations.
There's a comment from Kelly that says, I went to a conference once with Eric Jensen, who shared a lot of research on the brain, especially in children of poverty. He shared a great study on mice or rats and the topic of hope, and also how the human brain actually changes given the right experiences at school, regardless of experiences outside of school.
Yeah.
Teachers can achieve so much by giving children good relationships and experiences with success.
And I love the statement, right? Not necessarily a question, but so I'm going to piggyback on the statement because I think it's so powerful. One of the pushbacks I get often in my work is, well, Rick, if we understand all that you're telling us and we practice all that you're telling us, then these kids go back to these deplorable home situations or high poverty, high violent neighborhood situations. Is that all undone? I go, none of it's undone. It's the absence of planting any seed that doesn't give the kids a chance. And so our job together is to plant as many seeds of hope in our kids as we can. And your point is absolutely correct. We now have MRIs and fMRIs, and we can see how the brain's architecture and geography changes both positively if we focus on that particular development of the brain, or negatively through trauma and risk and negativity, that part of the brain. So we know from the neuroplasticity of the brain how active the brain is in changing its architecture to represent the world in which it lives. Negative world, negative design of the brain. Positive world, positive. If we know that, let's do something about it. If we know that washing our hands prevents the spread of disease, let's wash our hands. If we know believing, connecting, time traveling affects the psychological spread of psychological disease like hopelessness, let's believe, connect, time travel.
Rick, we have come to the conclusion of our presentation, and this was just so inspiring, and it was a reminder to all of us, educators especially, of why we're here, why we're, what we should be promoting in our students, and understanding that, every child can be successful and we should always have hope in them. And so I appreciate you taking the time to share that message with us. And thank you everyone for attending. it's so, we really appreciate it. And as I mentioned, I will follow up with you. We have some digital educator resource to share with you from all of the organizations that help to plan Remake Learning. And then of course, there's that wonderful surprise of the Barnes & Noble gift cards that we will be letting you know if you are a winner. So thank you so much. And of course, we will provide a recording of today's workshop with Rick Miller. Thank you so much, everyone. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
As I always say, keep your seatbelts fastened. You're traveling at the speed of hope.
Love that. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care.